Okay, sister.
Okay.
Let us begin.
Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. Can you still hear me?
Sure can.
Perfect. I just want to make sure. All right. So, hi, everyone. Welcome to Storytime with Lynn. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name's Chelsea Berkowitz, and I am the new development associate here at Wildlife Rescue and Rehabilitation. I've been in this position for a little, I think like 3 days over a month now, so I'm still pretty new, but I was actually a volunteer for Wildlife Rescue for, I think, almost 6 years before I started working here, so I've been around a little while. And I'm super excited for my first story time with Lynn, so hopefully everything goes according to plan. We're going to get started in just a minute, but I wanted to let you know kind of how things are going to go this evening. Lynn's going to read a story from her book, and then she's going to be available for a question and answer afterwards, and she's going to give us a couple updates about Wildlife Rescue and what we've been up to recently. So if y'all have a comment or a question or anything like that, you can either unmute yourself to ask the question, or if you don't feel like speaking, you can also definitely type your answer or your question into the chat box, and I will be watching that. And at the end of our time together, we are going to have a little raffle for 3 copies of one of Lynn's books that she has signed, so you can continue reading the stories at home. So without further ado, let's get started, and I will let Lynn read one of her stories.
So hello, everybody. I'm looking at a screen that's not in front of me. So if my view, I'm looking at you is odd, it's because I don't know what the hell I'm doing as far as the screens are concerned. I'm reading a book. So that's my technology, books. So what I'm going to read about tonight is a situation we had with Egrets some years ago when we were still, gosh, this would have been back in probably early 2000s, because we still had the sanctuary in Burney and we're building here in Kendalia. So, and egrets have been somewhat in the news a bit lately. Y'all might be aware of that, and certainly in our news to y'all, because they really are in trouble. There's a lot of people who are just out to get them, taking down their rookeries and never appreciating that they need somewhere to live, trying to get them out of city parks, of all places, and basically just harassing them and harming them. So we felt like reading a story about them, even though it's a story from the past, would be good for right now. So here I go. The rains began late on a Saturday night. Here at Wildlife Rescue, we were initially grateful because finally it seemed that this parched, dry earth was going to feel some relief. For weeks, we've been rescuing wild animals who were suffering because of the drought conditions in the area. By early Monday morning, it was clear that this was to be something other than simply relief from a long, dry spell. Heavy rains can be devastating to infant wildlife, and floods are certain to take a tremendous toll on helpless babies of all species. The Wildlife Rescue telephones began ringing early Monday morning. The majority of calls were concerning baby birds who'd fallen from the trees, often nest and all. In most cases, mother and father birds were nearby doing their best to care for their young in the midst of pouring rain. By midday, the calls were also concerning white-tailed fawns. Some were trapped by swollen creeks. Others were soaked and cold, crying for a mother who'd been washed downstream. The news had to keep reporting on the now dozens of people in danger from floodwaters. But there was another community of beings who were also in dire need of help. The wildlife in flooded counties were battling to stay alive and to take care of their tiny babies. The calls tripled by Tuesday afternoon. More fawns, now baby raccoons, possums, snakes, squirrels, and even tiny infant skunks were all being washed up out of their dens. At the Burney and Kendalia sanctuaries, we too had to deal with rising water. And Burney enclosures were being inundated with rushing rainwater that was carrying debris of every shape and size. In Kendalia, the earthen dams on our pond were hit so hard that in a thunderous roar, the dams burst and the little Blanco River reclaimed her original route. The road to Kendalia became impassable. Staff could not get within a mile of wildlife rescue. Fortunately, live-in interns were able to continue providing care for the animals here. It was difficult for wildlife rescue volunteers in San Antonio to get to all the animals who needed their help, but somehow, through perseverance and determination, they kept doing their job. Some even managed to find a way through to Blanco so that they could bring rescued animals here to Kendalia. In the midst of all this chaos, we really did not expect a call from the San Antonio Zoo, but the native wildlife who live on and near the zoo property were having their problems too. WRR had been called on earlier to help the egrets who were left homeless after their rookery near the zoo was bulldozed. Because the egrets' home was destroyed, the birds were forced to find a new home where they could safely raise their young this year. The egrets chose a group of large trees near an area called Big Lake inside the zoo property. When the rains came, some of these trees came crashing down into the water. According to zoo staff who called us, there were egret nestlings, fledglings, and adults all clamoring to hold on to broken branches and toppled foliage. For some reason, the zoo officials did not choose to provide care for these snow-white birds. One staff member from the zoo expressed concern that the egrets would simply not survive. Wildlife rescue was called, and in less than 2 days, we were caring for 98 homeless egrets.
Oh my God.
The first group came late in the afternoon. There were several plastic tubs filled with rain-soaked, hungry, cold birds. Nobody had even bothered to dry them off. Egrets have long, spindly legs. These are even more obvious on the nestlings whose body take up less space than those long legs. And this first clutch of babies seemed to be nothing but legs. But as soon as we were able to warm them and dry their feathers, their mouths became the more dominant part of their anatomy. These birds have been through a terrible time. Many of their family members did not survive the incident. They were frightened and they needed and wanted food. Nestling egrets, like most wading birds, have a unique and endearing appearance. They possess a rather scrawny-looking body, pencil-thin, long legs, and a sturdy, arrow-straight beak that begins where two bright, dark eyes stop in the midst of an explosion of spiked feathers. They have a voice that is deep and crackly. They are tenacious birds who learn at an early age that being precocious will probably save their lives. I was fortunate to be in our clinic when the first rain-soaked band of baby egrets were brought in the door. I looked into the clear plastic tub, and in the midst of this heap of bird life sat the tiniest of babies. This little fellow looked as if he had just given up on life. I could only imagine what kind of day he had experienced. We were dealing with pouring rain, hundreds of animals to feed, but he was dealing with holding on to life. There was something about this little one. He was so sad. He had lost his mother, his home, and now here he was in a strange place being picked up by humans. Could things possibly get any worse? One by one, we quickly examined each bird. This group was fortunate. No broken legs or wings, just tired, cold, and hungry. We separated the birds into smaller groups, placed heat lamps over their makeshift nests, and as their food was prepared, we all wondered how many more animals would be coming through our doors that day. The rains persisted, as did the flow of animals coming to the sanctuary, more fawns, raccoons, mockingbirds, skunks, ringtails, and even, yes, more egrets. By day 4, we were praying for the rain to stop. During every waking moment, everyone at Wildlife Rescue was doing all in their power to dry, feed, and keep the bodies and souls of incoming animals together. And through all of this activity, there sat one tiniest of all baby egrets. His spirit had not recovered, but at least he was willing to take some of the nourishing food we offered. He was in a warm wooden box with 2 other youngsters. There was no one as small as he, so we had to watch to be sure he was not trampled or pecked by his new, very small family members. As the days passed, so did the rain, and we were up to our ankles in mud. But at least we could relax when we looked outside and saw an occasional patch of blue overhead. The road to the sanctuary was being repaired and staff was able to come and go. Life was not back to normal, but it was at least more manageable. The tiniest of baby egrets was beginning to show some signs of recovery as well. I lifted him out of his nest box late one afternoon to offer him some food. At this age, you usually have to open those pointed beaks and gently push the food toward the back of their little throat. But this little fellow was having none of that. He looked up at me with those piercing dark eyes, turned his beak toward the clump of meat, and in one swift movement gobbled down a chunk the size of a meatball. The little one was on his way. Perhaps he had decided that since he'd survived all the other recent traumas life had presented him, that he could handle this one as well. Over the coming weeks, I would have the great privilege of watching the hundreds of animals who were rescued during the storms grow strong and independent. We did not save every life that was brought to us, but we did save hundreds of them. Entire litters of raccoons, skunks, and possums were rescued and have since been set free. Literally hundreds of wild birds who came to us looking like there was no hope for them are now flying free in the huge oak and hackberry trees here in Kendalia. And of over the 120 egrets who found their way to wildlife rescue in those few days, more than 2/3 of them survived. For these milk white, graceful, and fragile birds who have twice lost their homes due to their rookeries being torn down, we can now offer them a new and truly safe home. A home here at Wildlife Rescue, where we have already released dozens of rescued birds. A home, I'm happy to say, where they seem to be choosing to stay put. For now, every day, you can look into the sky that hovers over the sanctuary, and you will see flying there the most pure white, graceful, long-legged birds. And somewhere in the midst of those beauties is one little fellow who not so very long ago was the tiniest of babies, cold and with little hope. He looked as if he had just given up on life. He'd lost his mother and his home, but he had not lost the spirit that inspired him to keep trying to hang on and to survive what was the worst day of his life.
Very good. She's a good writer.
Yeah.
And I remember that day really well myself because I was so appalled, frankly, at how the animals were not taken care of at the zoo, how they were just dumped in tubs and cardboard boxes and brought to us. But as always, all of us here at Wildlife Rescue were so appreciative, respectful, and in awe of what these animals went through and how yet they just kept fighting. Anybody have any questions for me or comments?
If you'd like, feel free to put anything in the chat.
Yeah, if y'all want to send something in the what they call the chat room. Do so.
Oh, ask how many egrets they have now.
What was that?
Oh, how many egrets do you have there at the wildlife now?
Well, now, and of course, every year we take in however many are out there who get into trouble. We've been seeing more every year when we know, we know why, because their rookeries are getting bulldozed. In the most recent newsletter we wrote about at Lake Elmendorf, how their rookery was completely destroyed. And we end up with some of those birds. And especially what happens when their rookeries are destroyed. The rookeries are where they're having their babies and where they're trying to raise babies. And so we will get dozens or hundreds of them. I think we've taken in over 300 this year so far.
That sounds right.
Yeah, so hundreds again. And these birds, it's such a travesty because these birds are just trying to raise their young. They're a migratory species. They come in and grace whatever area they're in with their beauty. And then what do people do but tear down the trees that they're in? The babies come toppling down. If they end up on a cement sidewalk, concrete sidewalk, they break their legs, they break their wings. So it's a really sad situation. We were speaking out against how these birds are treated. They are a federally protected bird. And yet, because either USDA or a park official or some park, committee will say they're a nuisance, then they can do whatever they want to.
That's terrible.
It is terrible. I mean, essentially the birds have no protection, because what gets me is protected wildlife can be labeled nuisance. And if who's ever labeling that says, well, their droppings are causing a problem, or if they're a mammal, they're chewing onto some of the siding of a house or whatever it is, well, they're a nuisance. You can get rid of them. Well, there goes their protection. And I always say, if you want to look at a nuisance species, go look in the mirror.
I know. I agree with you 100%. 100%.
It's terrible. It's like these animals, even when they're protected, they can't be protected from us.
Let's see. Mary asked if this was the storm that wiped out Wimberley, but then said the river flooded and wiped out the Wimberley camps.
This was actually a storm earlier than that one. Yeah, this was one of those big storms that we get every few to several years. So this was earlier than the one that did take Wimberley, just a few years back.
I want to say one thing. You're a very good writer.
Oh.
We've listened to you several times, and you're very good at expressing about the animals, and very good writer.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
It's easy to do. They tell their own story. I just write down the words that help the world hear their story.
Yeah.
Where do the egrets migrate to when they leave San Antonio?
Yeah, they go south, basically, where it's warmer in the winter.
Let's see. Grace asked, are there no associated organizations that assist you in preserving the rookeries?
We've not been able to get anybody. We're trying to get Audubon to be a little bit more, proactive and stronger about that kind of issue and actually protecting where these birds live. But it seems that there's just not a whole lot of people interested, and perhaps a lot of people don't know. But Audubon's aware of it. We have definitely engaged with them to let them know what's going on and how these rookeries are just absolutely wiped out, trees taken down, totally destroyed. But we're somewhat of a lone voice right now. HSUS might be joining with us. The Texas branch of HSUS might be joining with us, but we're kind of leading, Wildlife Rescue is kind of leading the charge on this issue. Does anybody have any other questions or comments?
Grace also asked, why are the trees being downed?
People are taking the trees down to get rid of the birds. I mean, that's exactly why they're doing it. They're destroying the birds' home so that the birds will have to move on. They will be forced to move on because there's simply nowhere for them to live anymore. So not only do the birds lose their home, but the trees lose their lives too. It's all bad.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say hi to Michelle. I know she had to pop in a little bit late, so hello to Michelle.
I got another quick question. Have you seen any signs of global warming at your rescue place?
I will tell you that what we're seeing is that the behavior in native wildlife is beginning to shift. And I think the very best explanation for that is climate change. They're beginning to have babies at different times of the years, more extended baby seasons in the case of some species. We're starting to see behavioral changes in them as well, as far as where they're living, whether they're extending their range, looking for new food sources. So there's a lot of things about climate change that our species, the humans, are not always experiencing. I mean, some are, of course. We know some devastating things that have been happening with flooding and just different types of storms and wildfires. But the wildlife is really experiencing it every moment of every day.
I figured that things were happening.
Yeah.
And will continue to happen.
Yes.
Which is very sad.
Well, it is particularly sad because we could have prevented it.
Right.
And we could be working to stop it, and we're simply not.
Not going. No.
No.
Nobody's going to do anything, and then it'll be too late. It's almost too late now.
I think it probably is too late now.
Too late. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Sad.
It is a tragedy because we're taking so many species down who never, they don't drive cars, they don't have coal plants, they don't, and yet they're suffering from our activities.
Right. That's true.
It's terrible.
That's true. And we're going to be, I feel like we'll be punished in the long run.
Well, we will, and I don't know if we are so blockheaded we're not even going to realize it, but yes, we certainly will. It's what we've done to the planet is bad for everybody. The real tragedy about it is that the animals didn't deserve what they're getting, and here we're the ones who are creating all this, and so whatever we get, we've kind of brought on ourselves.
Right, I agree with you there.
Yeah.
I agree. Right. And I'm older, and so I'm not going to be around that many more years, but I feel so bad for my grandsons and stuff for what their life is going to be, because I'm more aware and have read, but they seem to go their merry way without, they think that nothing's going to happen, or they'll worry about it later. I think that's a lot of it.
No, that is a lot of it. That is a typical, really it's human behaviors. Oh, well, my day every day looks about the same as it's always looked, so I guess everything's okay.
Yeah.
We don't stop and think bigger, because we need to look at more than what's right in front of us.
I think a lot of people feel that technology will eventually solve all our problems, and it's not.
No, in fact, it's creating a lot of our problems, I think.
Right.
I agree there.
Yeah. It's separating us, it's making us less compassionate, it's making us less capable of, engaging with each other, less interested in engaging with each other. And it becomes what people of a certain generation, they live for it and with it and by it. And as if it's the thing, and they forget about books and writing and pens and paper and all these wonderful things that have been around for eons, and think that all this stuff, the screens and the devices, are just the end all do all. They don't even know what they're missing.
Right.
Excuse
me. And another thing too, right along that story, is I'm a retired VA nurse, and nurses in the paper thing where families are hollering at them and threatening them and all this kind of stuff, because and that never happened 30 years ago. People were compassionate, people were nice, families were appreciative of whatever you did for so that's kind of a picture of what we are now too, along with COVID and the animals and things. But
it's true. It's like we're not a compassionate culture anymore.
No. And that to me is breaks my heart, because
it's terrible. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And so again, so unnecessary. What does it take to say thank you and be kind to somebody? What does that take?
Nothing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Nothing.
And you feel better, and the world's a better place when you are a compassionate individual. Right.
Because really, when you get to it, you only take, when you pass over, you only take your good deeds with you. You don't take all the money you got or all the status. All you take is your deeds.
Good then, does it?
No, it doesn't. And the only thing you take is your good deeds.
That's right.
And people should become more aware of that. and be thinking more. Yeah.
I know, but I'm afraid they don't think about it at all. They don't want to think about it.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right, right.
Well, I'm glad you're really doing these programs, Lynn. I think it's terrific.
Well, thank
Really
you. I really
enjoying it.
appreciate all of y'all coming and listening. And we've been doing it for most of this year, maybe a little bit of last year as well. So it's been a lot of fun to do it.
Yeah. And we've been to your wildlife place a couple times and really enjoyed when you had the open house, really enjoyed seeing what all you were doing.
And we put your organization in our will too. So that's part of it.
Oh, thank you.
It's part of our will.
Yeah. And next year, you know, next year is our 45th year.
Yeah.
It's year 45. So depending on what we can do with COVID and everything, depending on what we can do, we would like, again, to have some in-person events if it seems like a smart and wise thing and safe thing to do. And one of the things we want to do next year is have another, you know, Members Day out here at the sanctuary. And with it being all outdoors and all, we might feel that it's probably going to be okay. So we're talking over that now, and we'll certainly be in touch and let everybody know what the plans are for that.
Yeah, well, that'll be good.
Great.
Yeah. Well, good night, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh,
and,
I have to do.
I'm gonna turn it over now. I'll turn it back over to Chelsea. And Chelsea, thanks for your hard work in setting all this up.
Of course.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Right. So as we're wrapping up, I just have a couple things. I'm about to put a donation link in the chat if anyone feels so inclined or you're able to at this time. Every donation is very impactful and helpful, and it does help us continue to do free programs like this. So if you are able, we would greatly appreciate that. And then I just have a couple other upcoming event announcements. So we do have Giving Tuesday is coming up on November 30th. We're going to have a lot of stuff going on leading up to Giving Tuesday. So we are going to have a community day at our San Antonio location that's going to involve some arts and crafts and also opportunities to make enrichment for the animals in our care. So keep an eye out for more details about that. And we're also going to be having a service day here at our Kendalia location. So it's going to be kind of a late morning of just different opportunities for service projects. So keep an eye out for that as well. And you'll see we have some various stories and contests and things and challenges going on social media. So keep an eye on all that. And then Giving Tuesday, like I said, is November 30th. So that's going to be, we're really aiming to raise money for a lot of the animals who are currently living in our sanctuary. And our other fun event coming up is Artistic Animals. That's taking place December 4th. It is online completely again this year. We just, with COVID and everything, wanted to make sure that we were being as safe as possible. So we are doing it online again this year. But you may have noticed in the background here, we've got a couple of different paintings. These are going to be some of the artworks that are going to be on sale for Artistic Animals. This is a fundraiser where the animals living in our sanctuary who enjoy painting get the opportunity to have fun with some non-toxic safe paints on a canvas, and then we offer those for sale. So we have some from our coatis, our different primates, all kinds of fun stuff. So that's going to be a really great event, and that, like I said, is December 4th. So those are a couple of things coming up on the horizon. And then I do have 3 signed books to raffle for that are signed by Lynn. So for our participants, so I'm going to go ahead and just, I've used a random name generator. So I will, give me just a sec here. Okay, first person is Grace. That's your Grace Paddleford, right? Is you, Grace?
I don't speak well.
That's okay, but that's you, right?
Grace Paddleford.
Yes, Grace. Okay, yeah. So if you'll you can either, I can give you my email address and you can send me your address and we can send you a signed copy of Lynn's book so that you can have that. You were our first raffle winner.
I want it?
Yeah, you won a signed copy of Lynn's book. We're raffling off 3 and you were the first name.
Oh my goodness. How wonderful.
Yeah, so I will, I can either, would it be easier for me to send you an email to get your address? Yes, okay. I will do that. And then next person is going to be Sue and Kim Vogel. I see a Kim. Is that Kim of Sue and Kim Vogel? Yes. Okay, perfect. So Kim, do you want me to send you an email as well so that I can get your address to get you a book? Perfect. Okay, and last name, let me see here, is Mary Hill. I see that you're here as well, Mary. You want me to send you an email as well, Mary?
You can probably turn it off.
Okay, perfect. I will put that there for you. And so congratulations to those 3 winners. We're excited to be able to send you some books so that you can keep reading some of Lynn's stories. And that's it for tonight. I hope y'all have enjoyed your time getting to talk with Lynn, just having some important discussions about egrets and other things impacting wildlife in our area and all around the world. So have a great rest of your night, and thank you all so much for coming. We look forward to seeing you soon. Have a good night, everyone.